Now let's get to what the heart of the matter was today. What was unfolding on the inside of this court? I'm going to bring in Jordan Fisher right now, who is our producer and reporter who has covered diligently all of the events surrounding the January 6th folks who have been arrested. Jordan, take us through sort of bit by bit what unfolded inside today. And you wanted to make a point, too, about Trump's defense attorneys. They've got local ties to D.C.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, in many ways it was a very common, very normal initial hearing. The former president sat down. He had the charges he faces read against him. He was told the conditions of his release, which are very standard, except for the judge noted specifically that he is not allowed to contact any of the presumed witnesses in the case unless through counsel. He was joined at the defense table today by two of his attorneys, John Lauro and Todd Blanche. Both of them, as you said, Adam, do have DC ties. Todd Lauro did both his undergrad and law school studies at Georgetown. He was elected as an A&C, as a matter of fact. Todd Blanche did his undergraduate studies at American University before getting his law degree at Brooklyn College's law school.
And there were references inside of this hearing to the magnitude and scope of evidence that's being brought to bear by the federal government, and sort of alluding to the fact that this is going to take a lot longer than Jack Smith, the special counsel, would hope it would take.
Sure. What we heard from the judge today is that the government has 7 days to give the court and the defense some idea of how long they think their trial would take, how big they think their case is. Now, if you look at that 45-page indictment that was unsealed earlier this week, you really can already see the scope of this case, how many witnesses they must have talked to, how many hours and hours and hours of testimony we know the grand jury has heard over the last more than a year. We have an idea of many of who those witnesses are, including one of former President Trump's attorneys, Evan Corcoran, who was in the courtroom today. He was compelled to testify earlier this year. We also know that people like former Arizona House Speaker Rusty Bowers has testified. He spoke before the January 6th committee last year and said that he felt like they had tried to use him as a pawn in the scheme that the former president is now charged in.
I want to back up for just a second, Jordan, and take more of a wide view of what you saw in there today. How did this differ from what you've seen from other first appearances for defendants appearing on charges related to January 6th?
Initial appearances are normally very quick, and in fact many of the January 6th defendants have benefited by being able to do these initial appearances virtually. The former president chose to do his today in person. As I said, he was at the table with both of his attorneys. He did not waive formal reading of the charges. They were read, and in some ways this was a much more formal proceeding. We also heard a lot more about how the case will proceed than you normally do in an initial hearing, laying out some of the timetable. The next hearing will be before District Judge Tanya Chutkin, who was randomly assigned the case. She was appointed to the bench in 2013 by former President Obama. She'll now take over from the magistrate judge who heard it today.
Right, that hearing coming up on August 28th. Trump himself not expected to appear in person. I know we're going to hear a lot more from you tonight. Jordan Fisher, thank you so much.